they fucked up. Captain Darren Thomas and his misfit human crew had brought the mighty Voth Empire crashing down on humanity's head. Their daring raid on a remote Voth outpost, in search of alien tech to hawk on the black market, had gone south faster than a Vega rocket. Alarms shrieked and Voth soldiers swarmed as Darren and first mate Jack Ripper Cade shot their way to the colony vault. The Voth bureaucrat inside had sneered that their heist had sealed Earth's doom. The Empire would never let such disrespect stand. Darren's crew barely escaped with their lives and scant loot before Voth ships descended. Back aboard their own ship, the horrible truth crystallized. Galactic news feeds blared the Voth Emperor's rage. He declared humanity's theft an act of war. The fledgling Earth Alliance would be scoured from existence as penance for their insolence. Darren stared numbly at the screens. His crew's bungled smash and grab had just ignited a war Earth wasn't ready for. The Alliance's meager colonies were scattered and primitive next to the galaxy-spanning Voth. Limping to the human colony of New Ithaca for urgent repairs, Darren expected to be strung up. Instead, cheering crowds hailed his crew as heroes. The colonists, long chafing under Voth rule, were ecstatic someone had finally bloodied the Empire's nose. But celebration turned to grim resolve as the colony's governor gravely informed Darren that a Voth war fleet was bearing down on New Ithaca to make an example of humanity's defiance. Guilt churned in the crew's guts, rogue and scoundrel though they were. Evacuation ships fled, conscripts drilled, and defenses groaned into place, all while the pirates watched helplessly. The enormity of their blunder crashed over them like a cold wave. With Voth warships burning on the horizon, Darren faced a choice. Run now, with the screams of the dying still in his ears, or stay and fight for humanity's survival against a foe that outclassed them in every way. Time was almost up. As the Voth warships loomed on the horizon, their hulls glinting in the dying light, Darren made his choice. He turned to his crew, eyes sharp. "We started this mess. We're sure as hell gonna help finish it." Ripper cracked his knuckles, a feral grin splitting his weathered face. "Aye, Captain. Let's give these Voth bastards a taste of human steel." Darren strode into the colony's command center, his crew falling in behind him. Governor Winters looked up from a holomap, his face lined with fatigue. "Captain Thomas, I suppose you'll be running now that the fighting's about to start." "No, Governor. We're here to stand with New Ithaca. This is our fight, too." Darren met Winters' gaze steadily. "My crew and I have skills your people need. Put us to work." Winters raised an eyebrow, then nodded slowly. "Provisional, Commander Thomas, it is then. We'll need every gun we can get." He turned to Ripper. "Mr. Cade, you and your crew will lead our guerrilla units. Hit the Voth hard and fast, then melt away. Bleed them for every inch they try to take." Ripper saluted with a predatory smile. "With pleasure, Governor." The colony became a hive of activity as soldiers rushed to their posts and families huddled in underground shelters. In the distance, the whine of Voth engines grew louder. Darren and his crew worked feverishly, distributing weapons, shoring up defenses, and drilling the colonists in basic tactics. The first Voth shells screamed down from the sky, exploding in gouts of flame and shrapnel. Buildings crumbled and fires raged as the bombardment intensified. In the chaos, Governor Winters' command post took a direct hit. Darren watched in horror as the structure collapsed, entombing the colony's leader beneath tons of rubble. Panic rippled through the defenders, threatening to become a rout. Darren leaped atop a burned-out hulk of a transport, his voice booming across the square. "People of New Ithaca! The Voth want to break us, to grind us beneath their boot heels. But we will not bend, and we will not bow. We'll fight them in the streets, in the hills, in the forests. We'll make them bleed for every life they try to take. Stand with me now, and let's show these Voth what humans are made of." A ragged cheer went up from the colonists, their tenacity hardening in the face of annihilation. As Voth drop ships began disgorging troops, Ripper and his guerrillas slipped away to prepare ambushes. Darren rallied the main defense force, leading them in desperate holding actions against the Voth onslaught. For days, the battle raged across the colony. Ripper's raiders struck from the shadows, their black market weapons and unorthodox tactics taking a heavy toll on the Voth. But for every invader they killed, A dozen more took their place. New Ithaca's defenses crumbled under the relentless assault, its people driven back, block by bloody block. Darren fought like a man possessed, his rifle smoking and his blade dripping with Voth blood. But in his heart, he knew it wasn't enough. The Voth were too strong, their numbers too great. Humanity needed a miracle. In a moment of desperate inspiration, Darren gathered his crew. "We need to cut off the head of the snake," he growled, pointing to the Voth command ship orbiting high above. "We infiltrate that ship, kill their admiral, and turn their weapons against them. It's our only chance." Ripper nodded grimly. "A suicide mission, then. I'm in." As the colony's last defenses crumbled, Darren and his hand-picked strike team blasted off in a stolen shuttle. They flew with reckless abandon, dodging the command ship's point defenses by inches. Cutting their way through the hull, they emerged into the sterile corridors of the Voth vessel. Alarms blared as the humans raced towards the bridge, leaving a trail of Voth corpses in their wake. They burst onto the command deck in a hail of blaster fire. Admiral Zortok roared with rage, his ceremonial blade flashing as he lunged at Darren. The two leaders clashed in a whirlwind of steel and blood, Zortok's monstrous strength pitted against Darren's agility and cunning. Zortok's blade scored a burning line across Darren's ribs, but the human twisted away, his own knife finding the gap in Zortok's neck armor. The admiral collapsed, gurgling his last breath. Seizing control of the ship's weapons, Darren turned them on the Voth fleet, the massive cannons tearing through the invaders' hulls easily. Faced with sudden devastation, the Voth commanders panicked, their ships scattering into disarray. But as the pirates watched the Voth retreat, their elation turned to ashes. New Ithaca lay in ruins below, its once proud cities reduced to smoking rubble. The cost of victory had been steep. Ripper looked to Darren, his eyes haunted. "Captain, we're getting distress calls from other colonies. The Voth are hitting them too. It's not just New Ithaca." Darren clenched his fists, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a leaden cloak. His crew had started this war, however unintentionally. Now, he realized, they had to see it through. As he pondered the daunting task ahead, the comm unit crackled to life. A woman's face appeared on the screen, her features hard and determined. "Captain Thomas, my name is Sandra Blackwood. I lead a remote human outpost, and we need your help. I have information that could change the course of this war, but I can't trust it to unsecured channels. Please, come to these coordinates with all haste. The fate of humanity may depend on it." The screen went dark, leaving Darren and his crew in heavy silence. The choice before them was clear, yet terrifying in its implications. They could slip away into the void, leaving the problems they'd created for others to solve. Or they could take up the fight, pitting their skills and cunning against the might of an empire. Darren looked to his crew, seeing the same commitment etched on their faces that he felt in his own heart. "Looks like we have our heading," he said softly. "Let's go save the human race." As the pirate's ship leapt into the abyss, the distant stars glimmered with the promise of battles yet to come. The Voth had bloodied humanity, but they hadn't broken it, not yet. And if Darren Thomas had anything to say about it, not ever. The stolen Voth command ship hurtled through space, its hull still bearing scorch marks from the battle over New Ithaca. On the bridge, Darren Thomas studied the coordinates Sandra Blackwood had transmitted, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Zephyrus," he muttered. "Never heard of it." Ripper leaned over the navigation console, his scarred face reflected in the flickering holo display. "Remote outpost, Captain. Way out on the fringes of human space. Perfect place to hide something important." As they approached the coordinates, a small, unremarkable planetoid swam into view. Its surface was a patchwork of rocky outcroppings and sprawling fungal forests, with no obvious signs of habitation. "Sneaky," Darren said with grudging admiration. "Cloaking tech?" A crackling voice came over the comms. "Unidentified vessel. This is Zephyrus Control. State your business or be fired upon." Darren keyed the mic. "This is Captain Darren Thomas. We're here at Sandra Blackwood's invitation, and we brought a present." He gestured at the Voth ship around them. A pause then. "Confirmed, Captain Thomas. Follow the beacon to landing pad 3. As they descended, the planet's surface shimmered, revealing a sprawling research facility nestled within a vast cavern. The stolen Voth ship touched down with a metallic groan, and Darren led his crew down the ramp. Sandra Blackwood strode across the landing pad to meet them. She was tall and lean, with close-cropped silver hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of her surroundings. "Captain Thomas," she said, extending a hand, "welcome to Zephyrus. I see the reports of your exploits weren't exaggerated." Darren clasped her hand firmly. "Dr. Blackwood, you said you had information that could change the course of the war. We're all ears." Sandra's eyes gleamed with impossibly strong excitement. "Follow me." She led them through a maze of corridors lined with humming equipment and holographic displays. Scientists and technicians worked feverishly at various stations, their faces etched with grit. "For years we've been studying Voth technology in secret," Sandra explained as they walked, "trying to find a weakness, a chink in their armor, and we've found it." She swept her hand over a control panel, and a holographic model of a vast, interconnected network sprang to life before them. "This is the Voth Quantum Entanglement Communication Network," Sandra said. "It's the backbone of their empire, allowing instantaneous communication and coordination across vast distances. Without it, their fleets and armies would be crippled." Ripper whistled low. "And you know how to take it down?" Sandra nodded. "We've developed a virus that can infiltrate and disrupt the network, but it needs to be uploaded directly to a central communication hub." Darren's eyes narrowed. "Let me guess, you need someone crazy enough to try and pull that off." Before Sandra could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. A technician's voice crackled over the intercom. "Voth scout fleet detected? They've found us." Darren and his crew exchanged grim looks. They'd brought the fight to Zephyrus's doorstep. "Time to earn our keep," Darren growled. He turned to Sandra. "We'll help defend this place, but when the dust settles, we need to talk about that virus." As they raced to their positions, Darren's mind whirled with possibilities. The mission Sandra proposed was audacious, maybe even impossible, but if they pulled it off, it could give humanity a fighting chance against the Voth juggernaut. The first Voth ships screamed into the atmosphere, their energy weapons lancing down at the hidden facility. Darren and his crew, along with Zephyrus's defenders, scrambled to mount a defense. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but they had the element of surprise, and nothing left to lose. As the battle raged, Darren found himself at the controls of a surface-to-air battery. He tracked a Voth landing craft as it descended, his finger hovering over the trigger. In that moment, he realized the weight of responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. He was no longer just a pirate out for his own gain. The fate of humanity might well depend on the choices he made in the coming days. Darren took a deep breath, steadied his aim, and fired. The Voth ship erupted in a ball of flame, but there were more behind it. Many more. The fight for Zephyrus, and perhaps the future of the human race, had only just begun. The battle for Zephyrus raged for days, a desperate struggle against overwhelming odds. Darren and his crew fought alongside the outpost defenders, their stolen Voth ship proving invaluable in repelling wave after wave of attackers. But even as they held the line, Darren knew they needed a more permanent solution. In a rare moment of quiet, he cornered Sandra in her makeshift command center. "Tell me more about this virus," he said, his voice low and urgent. Sandra's fingers flew across a holographic interface, bringing up schematics of a vast, sprawling network. "It's ready," she said. "But to deploy it, we need direct access to a Voth communication hub. The closest one is here." A pulsing red dot appeared on the map. Darren studied the location, his mind already formulating a plan. "That's deep in Voth territory. It'll be a one-way trip." "I know it's asking a lot," Sandra began, but Darren cut her off with a wave of his hand. "We started this war," he said grimly. "We'll finish it." The next hours were a blur of preparation. Darren's crew outfitted their ship with every piece of stealth tech Sandra's team could cobble together. Ripper pored over Voth patrol patterns, searching for gaps in their defense grid. As they prepared to depart, Sandra pressed a data crystal into Darren's hand. "The virus," she explained. "Good luck, Captain. The fate of humanity rests on your shoulders." The journey to the Voth hub was a nail-biting gauntlet of close calls and near misses. Darren's stolen ship ghosted past Voth patrols, its energy signature masked to appear as little more than background radiation. They emerged from hyperspace in sight of their target, a massive space station filled with communication arrays and defense turrets. Darren took a deep breath, steadying himself for what came next. "All hands, prepare for breach," he ordered. "Remember, we only get one shot at this." Their ship accelerated towards the station, weaving through a hail of plasma fire. At the last possible moment, Darren engaged the short-range teleporter Sandra's team had jury-rigged. The world dissolved in a shimmer of light. They materialized in a corridor deep within the station, alarms already blaring. Voth security forces converged on their position, but Darren and his crew fought their way through with the desperation of those who knew failure meant extinction. They reached the central computer core, a cavernous chamber humming with quantum processors. As Ripper and the others held off waves of Voth defenders, Darren interfaced the data crystal with the system. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then lines of alien code began to scroll across the screens, propagating through the Voth network at the speed of thought. "It's working!" Darren shouted over the din of battle. "Fall back to the ship!" They fought their way back to their entry point, teleporting out just as Voth reinforcements swarmed the chamber. As their ship hurtled away from the station, Darren watched the screens anxiously for any sign that their audacious attempt had paid off. At first, there was nothing. Then reports began trickling in. Voth ships drifting off course, supply lines faltering, entire defense grids going dark. A fierce grin spread across Darren's face. "Send word to every resistance cell," he ordered. "It's time to take the fight to the Voth." Across occupied space, human insurgents emerged from hiding. Striking with surgical precision, they targeted Voth shipyards, fuel depots, and command centers. The once mighty empire found itself reeling, unable to coordinate an effective response. But Darren knew the Voth wouldn't go down without a fight. As he rallied the scattered human forces, he couldn't shake the feeling that the true test still lay ahead. The war for humanity's survival had entered a new phase, and the stakes had never been higher. The virus-induced chaos rippled through Voth space, igniting a firestorm of human resistance. Darren Thomas found himself at the center of a growing movement, coordinating strikes and rallying scattered colonies to the cause. But he knew they needed more than guerrilla tactics to truly break the Voth's iron grip. "We need a killing blow," Darren announced to the assembled leaders of the newly liberated human worlds, "and I think I know where to strike." He pulled up a holographic display of a massive artificial construct. "Emperor Dralok's mobile throne world. Take that out, and the Voth Empire crumbles." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Sandra Blackwood stepped forward, her face etched with concern. "That's a suicide mission, Darren. The defenses alone." "Which is why we'll hit them with everything we've got," Darren countered. He turned to address the room. "I'm calling for volunteers. Every ship, every soldier who can hold a gun. This is our one shot at ending this war." In the days that followed, a massive fleet assembled. Darren stood on the bridge of the flagship Dreadnought, watching as ships of all sizes and configurations fell into formation. The crew around him was a patchwork of professional soldiers, civilian volunteers, and his own band of former pirates. Ripper approached, his scarred face grim. "Captain, we need to talk about the escape pods." Darren frowned. "What about them?" "We should jettison them," Ripper said flatly. "Make room for more fighters and ordnance. This is all or nothing, right?" "No," Darren said firmly. "We fight smart, not reckless. Those pods stay." Ripper's eyes flashed with anger. "You're going soft on me, Thomas. This ain't the time for half measures." Before Darren could respond, the comms officer called out, "Multiple contacts, Voth defense fleet incoming." The viewport erupted in a dazzling array of weapons fire as the two armadas clashed. Human ships disintegrated under the onslaught of Voth energy weapons. But for every loss, two more surged forward to fill the gap. "Push through!" Darren shouted over the din of battle. "We need to reach that throne world." A familiar voice crackled over the comms. "Darren, this is Thel Rin. My ship can clear you a path, but we won't survive the attempt. Darren's breath caught in his throat. He opened his mouth to protest, but Thelrin cut him off. Don't argue, just make it count. Before he could respond, Thelrin's rebel flagship accelerated, ramming through the Voth defensive line in a kamikaze run. The gap it created was quickly filled with more Voth ships, but it was enough. Darren's dreadnought slipped through, hurtling towards the massive throne world. All hands, prepare for boarding action, Darren commanded as they approached the colossal structure. The dreadnought shuddered under heavy fire, but held together long enough to disgorge waves of assault shuttles. Darren led the charge onto the throne world, fighting through corridors swarming with Voth elite guards. The air crackled with energy weapons and the screams of the dying. They pushed relentlessly toward the central reactor core, leaving a trail of bodies, human and Voth alike, in their wake. Finally, they reached their target. As his team planted demolition charges, Darren divided the remaining forces. We need to hold every access point. Buy us time to overload this thing. Ripper hesitated, clutching his weapon. Captain, An explosion rocked the chamber, and Ripper stumbled, a Voth energy bolt catching him in the side. Darren rushed to his friend's aid, dragging him behind cover. Ripper, listen to me, Darren said urgently. You need to get out of here. Take an escape pod, warn the fleet. For once, Ripper didn't argue. He nodded weakly, allowing two soldiers to help him towards the exit. Darren turned back to the battle, his mind racing. They were out of time, out of options. He keyed his communicator. Sandra, if you're listening, we could use a miracle right about now. As if in answer, his datapad lit up with an incoming transmission. Sandra's virus, modified to merge with the reactor overload. Darren's eyes widened as he realized the implications. Everyone out, he shouted. Get to the escape pods. This is going to be bigger than we thought. But as the last of his team retreated, Darren knew he couldn't leave. Someone had to ensure the charges detonated, that the virus uploaded successfully. He took cover behind a fallen Voth war mech, watching the timer tick down to 0. The world went white. White. Darren blinked, disoriented. The expected devastation hadn't come. Instead, he found himself floating in a featureless void, devoid of sound or sensation. A pinprick of light appeared in the distance, growing rapidly. Darren instinctively reached for it, and reality snapped back into focus with brutal intensity. He gasped, lungs burning, as he sucked in stale, acrid air. Alarms blared, and emergency lights cast everything in a sickly red glow. Darren struggled to his feet, surrounded by twisted metal and sparking circuitry. Status report, he croaked, but no response came. The Throne World's command center was a graveyard of shattered consoles and still forms. A familiar voice crackled over his comm unit. Darren? Darren, do you read? Sandra? He replied, hope surging. What happened? The reactor overload. It triggered something else. Some kind of subspace rift. Most of our forces made it out, but you. Darren's mind reeled. How long? Sandra's voice was thick with emotion. 2 years, Darren. We thought you were dead. Before he could process this, a violent tremor shook the room. Through a breach in the hull, Darren saw fragments of reality itself tearing apart and reassembling in impossible configurations. The fracturing, Sandra explained grimly. It's consuming everything. We need to get you out of there. Darren staggered towards what remained of the Throne World's bridge. There has to be an escape pod or... His words died as he saw the figure seated on the ornate command throne. Emperor Dralok, impossibly alive, stared at Darren with eyes that sparked with mad triumph. Too late, human, Dralok rasped. The entropy forge awakens. Reality buckled around them. Darren felt himself being torn apart at the molecular level. His consciousness scattered across fractured dimensions. The last thing he heard was Sandra's desperate voice. Darren, hold on! We'll find you! I swear we'll... Then darkness, silence, oblivion. Until an eternity later, rough hands dragged him from the wreckage of a Voth scavenger ship. Darren's eyes struggled to focus on the scarred face looming over him. Welcome back to the land of the living, Captain, Ripper growled, hauling Darren to his feet. Hope you enjoyed your nap, because we've got a universe to save. Darren's vision swam as he struggled to his feet, the acrid stench of burnt circuitry filling his nostrils. Ripper's scarred face loomed above him, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Captain," Ripper growled, hauling Darren upright. "Hope you enjoyed your nap, because we've got a universe to save." Darren blinked, his mind turning as he tried to process the impossible situation. "Ripper, but I saw you." "Escape pod, remember?" Ripper tapped his chest. "You ordered me out. Good thing, too, or I wouldn't be here to pull your sorry hide from this wreckage." As Darren's eyes adjusted to the dim light, he took in their surroundings. They stood amidst the twisted remains of a Voth scavenger ship, its hull breached and sparking. Through the gaping holes, he could see a desolate landscape of jagged rock and swirling dust. "Where are we?" Darren asked, his voice hoarse. "Sanctuary," Ripper replied, already moving towards a pile of salvaged equipment. "Or what's left of it. Come on, we need to move. The shield won't hold forever." As if on cue, a low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. Darren stumbled, catching himself on a bent bulkhead. "Shield?" Ripper tossed him a battered energy rifle. "I'll explain on the way. Right now, we need to get to the base before the next wave hits." They emerged from the wreckage into a howling windstorm. Darren squinted against the stinging dust, following Ripper's hulking form as they picked their way across the treacherous terrain. In the distance, a shimmering dome of energy pulsed and flickered. As they approached the shield perimeter, Darren saw figures in mismatched armor rushing to meet them. A familiar voice crackled over his comm unit. "Darren, is that really you?" Sandra's tone was a mix of disbelief and hope. "In the flesh," he replied, allowing himself a small smile. "Though I'm not entirely sure how." They passed through the energy barrier, the howling wind suddenly silenced. Darren took in the fortified base, a hodgepodge of prefab structures and salvaged Voth technology. At its center loomed a massive singularity reactor, its containment field humming with barely restrained power. Sandra emerged from the crowd, her face lined with fatigue and scars that hadn't been there before. She embraced Darren fiercely, then stepped back, all business once more. "We don't have much time," she said, leading them towards a reinforced bunker. "The entropy forge might be disabled, but we've got bigger problems now." Inside the command center, a holographic display dominated the room. It showed a wave of sickly energy spreading across star systems, leaving only void in its wake. "The entropic wave," a Voth scientist explained, her scaled features set in a grim expression. "A byproduct of our victory. Unless stopped, it will consume all of reality." Darren's mind raced as he absorbed the terrifying implications. There has to be a way to stop it. Admiral Korev, a grizzled veteran of a dozen campaigns, nodded grimly. "There might be, but it won't be easy." As Korev outlined the desperate plan to locate and reactivate the Astral Forge, Darren felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders once more. He met Ripper's eyes across the room, seeing his own dedication reflected there. "All right," Darren said, straightening his shoulders. "Let's split into teams. We've got astral capacitors to find and not much time to do it." As the others began preparations, Darren pulled Sandra aside. "I need to know. What happened while I was gone?" Sandra's eyes darkened. 2 years of hell, Darren, but that's a story for another time. Right now, we need you focused on what's coming." Darren nodded, pushing aside his questions for the moment. He turned back to the assembled teams, his voice carrying across the room. "I don't need to tell you what's at stake," he began. "Every inhabited system, every life in this galaxy and beyond, it all hangs in the balance. We're the only ones who can stop this. So let's get to work." As the teams dispersed to board their ships, Ripper fell in beside Darren. "Just like old times, eh, Captain?" Darren managed a wry smile. "Let's hope we have better luck this time around." They boarded the lead ship, its engines already warming for the perilous journey ahead. As the vessel lifted off, breaching Sanctuary's protective shield, Darren caught a glimpse of the entropic wave's ghostly advance on the long-range sensors. The race against oblivion had begun. The race against oblivion had only just begun. As their ship hurtled through the void, Darren gripped the command console, his squeezing hard. The view screen showed the ghostly tendrils of the entropic wave, an ever-expanding maw of nothingness, consuming everything in its path. Astral capacitor signatures detected, Sandra called out, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. 3 parsecs bearing 047. "Take us in," Darren ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. The ship shuddered as they pushed through the turbulent edge of the wave. Reality itself seemed to warp and twist, stars blurring into impossible shapes. Ripper cursed, wrestling with the controls. "Hold her steady," Darren shouted over the groaning of stressed metal. They emerged into a pocket of calm, a shimmering sphere of energy barely containing the entropic forces beyond. At its center floated an ancient structure, its surface etched with glowing runes. "That's our target," Sandra confirmed, "the Astral Forge." As they approached, alarms blared. The ship rocked violently, caught in some unseen grip. "What now?" Darren demanded. Zyrilia, the Voth scientist, hissed in alarm. "Impossible! It's the Lumina!" The view screen filled with a writhing mass of darkness, shot through with veins of sickly light. Tendrils of pure entropy lashed out, tearing holes in the fabric of space-time. "Evasive maneuvers," Darren ordered, but it was too late. Reality fractured around them. Darren felt his body stretched and compressed, his mind assaulted by visions of cosmic horror. Then abruptly, everything snapped back into focus. They found themselves in a twisted hellscape, the laws of physics bent beyond recognition. Fragments of planets and stars drifted by, slowly being consumed by the ravenous entity that surrounded them. "The Lumina," Zyrilia whispered, her scaled features pale with terror. "The progenitor of entropy itself." Darren's mind raced, piecing together fractured memories and half-understood theories. "The capacitors," he said suddenly. "We can use them against it." As if in response, the ship's sensors pinged, detecting the familiar energy signature of an astral capacitor. It pulsed weakly amidst the chaos, a beacon of hope in the cosmic maelstrom. "There!" Darren pointed. "We need to reach it before—" His words were cut short as the Lumina's psychic presence slammed into them. Darren felt his thoughts unraveling, his very essence being pulled apart by the ancient evil's hunger. Through sheer force of will, he pushed back against the assault. "Now!" he roared. "While it's focused on us!" Sandra and Ripper sprang into action, piloting the ship towards the capacitor. The Lumina's formless mass surged after them, reality warping in its wake. As they closed in on their target, Darren had a moment of clarity. This was more than a simple retrieval mission. They were bait, drawing the Lumina into a trap of its own making. "Prepare for dimensional inversion," he ordered, praying their hull would hold together long enough to implement his desperate plan. The ship's engines screamed as they pushed to maximum output. The astral capacitor grew larger in the view screen, its ancient power humming in harmony with the ship's systems. Just as the Lumina's tendrils began to envelop their vessel, Darren activated the inversion sequence. Space itself seemed to fold inward, the cosmic abomination's own warp domain collapsing into an infinitesimal point. A blinding flash erupted as the singularity formed, compressing the Lumina's vast form into a space smaller than an atom. The resulting implosion sent shockwaves rippling across subspace, purging entropy and restoring natural order. When Darren's vision cleared, he found himself staring at familiar stars. The twisted hellscape was gone, replaced by the comforting void of normal space, but the cost had been immense. The ship's hull was barely intact, emergency force fields the only thing keeping them alive. Of the mighty fleet that had set out to save the universe, only a handful of vessels remained. As damage reports flooded in and distress calls echoed across all frequencies, Darren allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. They had won, but the real work of rebuilding was only just beginning. "Status report," he said, his voice hoarse. "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with out there." The universe had been saved, but at a terrible price. Now they had to face the consequences of their actions and forge a new path forward in a cosmos forever changed by their high-stakes endeavor. Darren Thomas stood atop the half-finished spire of New Avalon's burgeoning capital, surveying the sprawling construction site below. Scaffolding and prefab structures intertwined with gleaming Voth technology, a testament to humanity's resilience and adaptability. "Progress report," he said into his comm unit, eyes fixed on the horizon where the setting sun cast long shadows across the scarred landscape. Admiral Korev's gruff voice crackled through. "We've secured the eastern quadrant, but there's been another skirmish with Rourke's band over the fusion core salvage." Darren pinched the bridge of his nose. "I'll speak with him. Again." As he descended the spire's gravity lift, a crowd gathered in the plaza below. Darren recognized the telltale signs of unrest: clenched fists, angry murmurs, and accusatory glares directed at a group of Voth laborers. He stepped between the factions, hands raised. "What seems to be the problem here?" A burly miner with a patched pressure suit jabbed a finger at the Voth. "They're stealing our jobs, using their fancy tech to do the work of 10 men. Before Darren could respond, alarms blared across the settlement. He tapped his wrist computer, bringing up a holographic display of the system. A cluster of red dots appeared at the edge of the sensor range. "Marauders," he growled. "Everyone to your stations. This is not a drill." The crowd dispersed, their grievances momentarily forgotten in the face of a common enemy. Darren sprinted towards the command center, barking orders into his comm. Inside, he found Zerelia hunched over a console, her scaled fingers flying across the interface. "Thomas," she hissed, not looking up, "you need to see this." The main screen flickered to life, displaying a star map riddled with anomalous energy signatures. Zerelia's voice trembled as she spoke. "The cosmic relics. They're reacting to something big." Before Darren could question further, a priority transmission cut through the chatter. Sandra Blackwood's face appeared, distorted by static. "Darren, we've got a situation on Hephaestus. The gravitational anomalies are getting worse, and we're seeing things that shouldn't exist. We need backup, fast." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving Darren staring at a blank screen. He turned to his assembled team, their faces a mix of drive and fear. "Assemble a rescue team," he ordered. "We're heading to Hephaestus." Hours later, Darren found himself on the bridge of the Defiant, a patchwork vessel cobbled together from human and Voth technology. Beside him stood an unlikely crew: Rourke, the scarred mercenary, Jezra, the smuggler with a price on her head in 3 systems, and a handful of Voth defectors, their presence drawing wary glances from the human crew members. As they approached Hephaestus, the ship's sensors went haywire. The view screen showed a maelstrom of twisted space-time, pulsing with sickly energy. "What in the 9 hells?" Rourke muttered, gripping the navigation console. Jezra's eyes widened as she pointed to a section of the chaotic vortex. "There! I see a ship!" Darren squinted, barely making out the familiar outline of Sandra's survey vessel. It hung motionless, trapped in a bubble of calm amidst the storm. "Take us in," he commanded. "Prepare for emergency extraction." The Defiant plunged into the maelstrom, its hull groaning under the strain of conflicting gravitational forces. Reality itself seemed to warp around them, stars stretching into impossible shapes. As they closed in on Sandra's ship, a massive tear in the fabric of space yawned open before them. Through it, Darren caught a glimpse of something that defied description, a realm of pure, unrestrained entropy. And from that nightmare dimension, something was emerging. A colossal tendril of pure entropy lashed out, its otherworldly energies tearing through reality itself. The Defiant shuddered violently as the attack grazed its hull, alarms blaring throughout the ship. "Shields at critical!" Jezra shouted, her fingers dancing across the flickering control panel. "We can't take another hit like that." Darren gripped the command chair, his mind racing. "Zerelia, options?" The Voth scientist's eyes darted between holographic displays, analyzing data at lightning speed. "The wormhole's expansion is accelerating exponentially. Conventional weapons will be ineffective." "Then we go unconventional," Darren growled, tapping his comm. "Korev, assemble the fleet. We're initiating Operation Singularity." As the massive human Voth armada gathered, Darren outlined their desperate plan. Singularity warheads, detonated within the wormhole's accretion disk, could trigger an implosion powerful enough to collapse the anomaly. The flotilla surged forward, engines blazing against the void. Bizarre, entropy-spawned entities swarmed to meet them, their forms defying comprehension. Rourke's voice crackled over the comms, his mercenary squadron carving a path through the chaos. "Thomas, we've got your 6, he barked. "Make it count!" Jezra's smuggling contacts had coordinated a daring flanking maneuver, drawing fire from the main thrust. The Defiant plunged deeper, Sandra's voice rising above the din of battle. "We're approaching optimal firing range," she reported, her lab overrun by gibbering transdimensional horrors. "But the targeting systems are fried. I'll have to align the solution manually." Darren watched the main view screen, his breath catching as Sandra wrestled with writhing tentacles of entropy while inputting firing coordinates. "You've got this, Sandra," he murmured. The Singularity missiles streaked from the Defiant's launch tubes, arcing gracefully towards their target. For a moment, hope flared in Darren's chest. Then everything went to hell. A massive tendril of entropic force erupted from the wormhole, obliterating half the human fleet in an instant. The Defiant rocked violently, consoles exploding in showers of sparks. Darren was thrown from his chair, pain lancing through his body as he slammed into a bulkhead. Through blurred vision, he watched in mute horror as the wormhole's maw violently expanded, consuming ships and planetoids alike. The missiles, their last bold strategy, were swallowed whole, lost to the growing singularity. "Thomas!" Zerilia's voice cut through the chaos. "We've failed. There's only one option left." Darren struggled to his feet, tasting blood. "What are you talking about?" The Voth scientist's eyes were grim. "We overload the quantum slipstream reactor, channel its energy into a focused implosion wave. It's our only chance to disrupt the singularity." "That's suicide," Darren rasped. "I know," Zerilia replied softly. "I'll do it myself." Before Darren could respond, Rourke's battered ship limped into view. The grizzled mercenary's face filled the crackling view screen. "Negative on that scale face," he growled. "This one's on me." Darren watched in disbelief as Rourke's vessel accelerated towards the wormhole, trailing debris and venting atmosphere. The mercenary gave a final, sardonic salute before his ship plunged into the swirling vortex of entropy. A blinding flash erupted as Rourke's reactor detonated, the implosion momentarily staggering the singularity's growth. But it wasn't enough. Jezra's voice cut through the comm static. "You boys started the party without me?" Her sleek smuggling craft streaked past, weapons blazing. "Let's give these cosmic bastards a proper send-off." Her ship disintegrated as it plowed into the wormhole's event horizon, unloading every scrap of ordnance in a defiant last stand. The cascading detonations funneled a hyperdense torrent of energy directly into the singularity's core. For a heartbeat, Darren dared to hope. Then the vortex of unraveling space-time surged outward once more, reality itself buckling under the strain. "It's not enough," Zerilia whispered, her scaled fingers flying across the console. "We need more power, more—" Her words were cut off as a searing beam of electromagnetic energy lanced across the cosmos, converging on the singularity. Then another, and another. Darren's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. Every remaining Allied ship, planetary defense grid, and jury-rigged power source had united in one world-shattering barrage. The focused tsunami of raw energy slammed into the wormhole's core, at last achieving critical entropy disruption. The singularity convulsed, reality itself seeming to hold its breath. Then, with a silent scream that shook the very foundations of existence, the wormhole imploded. A catastrophic shockwave of unimaginable force slammed into the Defiant. Darren's world dissolved into blinding light and searing pain as bulkheads, bodies, and the very fabric of space-time were rewritten into strange alien matter. When consciousness returned, Darren found himself suspended in a breathable limbo that defied description. Debris from the battle drifted lazily around him, transmuted into impossible shapes. Nearby, Sandra and Zerilia floated, their forms warped by entropic forces, into quasi-stable configurations that hurt to look at directly. "Where are we?" Darren managed, his voice echoing strangely in the formless void. Sandra's eyes were wide with a mix of terror and scientific fascination. I think we're in the birthplace of existence itself, the transient dimension where matter and antimatter first clashed at the moment of the Big Bang." Zyrilia hissed in alarm, gesturing to the swirling chaos beyond their small bubble of stability. "Whatever this place is, it's unraveling conventional physics the longer we remain. We need to find a way out, and quickly." As if in response to her words, half-sentient structures began to coalesce from the primordial chaos. Darren watched in awe and horror as entire galaxies were born and died in the span of heartbeats, fundamental forces shifting and realigning with each passing moment. "We need a ship," Darren said, his mind racing. "Some kind of horizon craft that can navigate this insanity." Sandra nodded grimly. "If we can't find a way back to our own universe, we'll be trapped here forever, adrift in the raw stuff of creation itself." Darren looked at the small group of survivors, human and Voth alike, their forms twisted by entropy into something both more and less than they had been. They were fragile travelers within the embryonic fabric of space-time, custodians of humanity's flickering spark. "Then we'd better get to work," he said, his voice steady despite the impossible vistas stretching in every direction. "We've got a universe to save." As the ragged band began to gather what resources they could from the cosmic wreckage, Darren couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Something fundamental had changed in the very nature of reality itself, and he had a sinking suspicion that the true battle against entropy was just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.